Welcome to our travel trailer Command Control Central, where we monitor and manage the power grid and solar for our Winnebago travel trailer. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. The Command Control Central's in the bedroom. We can probably monitor and manage this stuff in our sleep. Yeah, maybe not quite that easy. However, the Victron Energy system does really help us to manage this very easily. It all started with the battery monitor, and yeah, you could just use the battery monitor by itself. You can see the voltage of your battery. You can see how many hours might be left, the percentage charge of the battery, the number of amp hours going out, the wattage of the system. So you can do a lot of monitoring. You can even configure it from the battery monitor. But we went one step further, and we went to the color controller, the Victron color controller, as a matter of fact, where you can monitor the system, and it actually has a couple of different monitoring systems. As a matter of fact, this one we want to bring in some tank monitors. This was built originally for sailboats, where it's monitoring the tanks and even pumps in your sailboat. Well, we're going to bring that into our travel trailer, and we're going to start monitoring the tanks as well as the power system. But right now, we've just got the power system, so I like this view just a little bit better. However, we don't have to be in the bedroom in order to manage this. We can actually manage this remotely using the Victron remote management system. So let's go take a look at that.
The reason I chose Victron Energy was because it could integrate all of the systems and allow me to monitor and manage all of the systems in my environment. Now, along with managing them directly from the color controller, I can also manage them remotely. Victron Energy has vrm.victronenergy.com, where I could actually have multiple instances. If I had maybe a solar system at my home and a solar system at the campground and a solar system in my trailer, I could see all of those here. Well, I've only got one in my trailer, so I can go manage that particular system. The remote console allows me to monitor the system and see all of the different historical information about what's coming in, what's going out in terms of power. It allows me to manage the system. I can go and configure the system. You also see that I remotely monitor it from the iPad. The iPad gives me the same view. It's actually showing a pictorial type view here. But when I go into the system from the VRM remote console from my iPad, and I've done this actually from across the country, I can see the same kind of information that's available to me from the local system. Now, one of the things that you'll find is the monitoring is not just what's going on today. I can actually go in and monitor the last 24 hours from any day. I can go monitor what's gone on in the last year and see the information that's gone on over a period of time. What's the most solar I've ever drawn in? And so here it looks like May was that. So if I go in and say, let's just look at the last 30 days, and let's go see what May was like. So I can go analyze historically what's been happening in my power system, from the solar coming in to the AC going out to the AC coming in from shore power. And I can have all of that information. But I can also do it very quickly. Now, on my laptop, I'm actually going to connect directly to the color controller. So if I go to my laptop and I go look at the device lists, I can see that there's 4 Victron Energy devices that I'm managing. There's the color controller called the gateway. There's the multi-plus inverter, which is the VE bus system. It's sort of like the hub of that system. There's the battery monitor and the solar charger. Now, it's the gateway that's the center of all of the controller, and I can see there's actually a local IP address. Well, if I'm on the same local network as the color controller, and if I can remember the correct password, then I can connect directly to the controller. And this is where I can get immediate monitoring of the system. So monitoring the system both for immediately what's going on or monitoring it historically and seeing exactly what's going on historically is something you can do with this complete system. With the Victron Energy color controller that's connected up to the battery monitor, the MPPT solar controller, and the inverter charger. But not only does it allow me to monitor it, it allows me to configure it. If I go here, I can actually click on the configuration of the systems, and now I can see my multi-plus, my BMV, and I can actually go in just as if I were sitting at the color controller clicking the keys I can go in and click the keys here. So for example, I can go to the multi-plus, and you see how it switched on. I actually have the ability to go in and turn the inverter off. Let's say I just wanted to turn it off overnight. I don't need to go underneath the storage system where the inverter is, which I could do, but I can actually do this remotely from the color controller. Probably the one configuration I set a lot is the input limit. If I'm connected to shore power where I have a full 30 amp system, I want to allow up to 28 or 30 amps coming into my inverter. So I would change this from 18 to 28 amps. If, however, I'm plugged in mooch docking like I am now at our home, I'm plugged into a 20 amp circuit in our garage. So I don't want to blow the circuit in our garage, so I never want that shore power to draw more than 18 amps. I can set the input limit. So configuring the system is one of those things it's great to be able to do that. But it actually allows you to do this a couple of different ways. I can do it from the color controller, but when you're initially setting up your system, you might also need to configure it a little bit more in depth. And that's actually done through a tool called the Victron configuration tool. So if I go to my device list, one of the things the remote console allows me to do is to remote VE configure. So there is a tool called VE configure, and it's a desktop application. And I can go in, if you have the USB connection or a direct connection, you can actually plug directly into the inverter or the battery monitor and configure them using the VE config tool. But what I actually can do from the remote system is I can remote VE configure, and I can download a copy of that VE config file. So if I download, this actually happens to be from the multi-plus system. Now this is something I found I couldn't do from my iPad, but if I'm on my computer, I am allowed to download this configuration file. And then if I go in and show that configuration file, there's the file that I just downloaded. And if I open that into the VE config tool, now I'm actually reading the configured systems from my multi-plus inverter in my trailer. Now I'm not connected directly to it, mind you, but I am reading this file. And let's say I did want to go ahead and change the input limit. I'm allowed to overrule that input limit. I can go look at grids. I can set things about the inverters. This is where I actually sent an email to Battleborn batteries, and I asked them what were the best charge profile for Battleborn lithium batteries from the Victron inverter, and they gave me the exact settings that I should be setting here, and it actually improved the charging capabilities. So this is how you can go in. Well, there's the inverter settings, and then here are the charge settings. So these were the charge settings that I asked Battleborn battery about. So by getting these charge profile directly from Battleborn battery and them familiar with the Victron configurations, I was able to set a charge profile that was recommended by the battery manufacturer. So what I simply do there is I change it. I then was able to save those settings, and then from the remote configuration, I could then re-upload that configuration file through the Victron remote management console, and it would actually upload and reset the configuration settings on the inverter itself. So that was just a great way of using a even more detailed configuration tool that Victron Energy provides and being able to set the configurations. But most of those configurations, as I say, I'm able to do simply through the remote console as I connect to those. Now, if you do use the remote console, I am going to add a note here. This remote console is truly remote. If I'm sitting, let's say, in California in a hotel room, my travel trailer is somewhere in New Hampshire, the remote console is connecting up through the Netherlands, which is where Victron Energy is connected. And then it comes out to the network and connects up to the system where my travel trailer is, because that's where the color controller is now actually being remotely connected to over the internet. So you have to recognize the remote console is going to be a little bit slow because there is that network lag going through. If, however, you're on the same network, if I'm in the VRM settings, I can actually go see the IP address. And as I showed you here, connect directly to it. Now, this is a lot more responsive to be able to see the information that's here. So let's take a look at a few very specific examples of monitoring the system and with the kind of information you can get from monitoring that over a period of time. The first example we're going to use is one where the inverter has gone into assist mode. So we're going to go to the remote console, and we can see that coming from shore power, we've got about 1180 watts. That's the grid. But my AC load is 1600 watts. Well, some of that power is coming from my PV charger, my solar panels, and a little bit extra from the battery. So we now have 3 power sources feeding the AC loads that we have. Here we see the multiplus in assist mode, bringing 172 watts or so from solar. One of the great things you can view is each of the individual devices that are hooked up to the color controller can be viewed. In this case, the solar. It's currently in a state of bulk, bringing in about 178 watts. But if I scroll down, I can actually view the daily history. The daily history is really kind of cool because it can show me things like what's the maximum wattage that I brought in a day. On the day I was monitoring here, 380 watts. And I was also in charge time, bulk charge time for 4.5 hours, and float charge time for 6 hours. Now, that's everything as of today, but I can also view the details from yesterday. I can also scroll back a few days, and then there's also the ability to view the history, the total history. What's the maximum over the history of the controller that it's been logging information. So there's some really great historical information as well as current information through the controller. So you want to know what your solar's doing? Well, take a look at this. It's sped up about 10 times faster, but see, it's 400 watts, 400 watts. Clouds are getting ready to come. Get ready for it. And my PV is going to go down to 250 watts. Blasted clouds. One of the configuration options available via the color controller that I use an awful lot is the input limit on the multi-plus inverter. So here we started off at a campground where we had 28 amps as the limit because we had a full 30 amp circuit. But now we're come home and we're going to plug into a 12 amp circuit. So, well, if it were a 20 amp circuit, I could set it to 18 amps, but here it's a 15 amp circuit. So we're going to set the input limit to about 13 amps. I like that 2 amp cushion. So you want to know how much power an individual device draws? Well, here we've got the fridge and the hairdryer going, pulling 1670 watts. Turn the hairdryer off, 380 watts for the fridge and the various other items. That means that hairdryer is pulling about 1290 watts, folks. I hope you've enjoyed this third in our series on RVSolar, where we've covered monitoring and managing your system using the Victron color controller and battery monitor system that's monitoring the hybrid inverter and the solar controller and all of the power coming in and out of my battery systems. Look forward to the next few in the series where we'll cover the solar panels, the batteries, and the inverter in a little bit more detail. Be sure to subscribe for the Conquered Traveler so that you can be made aware of those future videos when we release them.